Hey there, and welcome to the Transparently Jordan podcast, where I'll be talking with a new guest each week, and we'll be covering topics in health, fitness, lifestyle, and so much more. So stick around and let's get into today's episode.
This is Radiant Voices Media.
And bring my physique to that next level, to try to become a physique which unattainable to most. I wanted to become like Arnie or The Rock, or like they had these idols who were this like really big muscular men. I'm like, I want to be like that. How do I get to that level? And then I realized that these guys didn't get there just from training hard and eating well. There's more to it than that.
As a runner, you have to face the truth about yourself on a regular basis, and it makes you more honest. You can't pretend to be faster than you are. You can't pretend that you are better prepared than you are. You cannot pretend to be a runner. You actually have to run. This is a quote by John Bincham. Hey all, and welcome to another episode. Now, I wanted to start with this quote because, as you all are aware, I've been doing something called the Vulnerability Corner with all of the guests from my last season. The questions are hard. The questions make the guests think. They also allow me to think, really. I've been answering these questions that I ask each guest on my Instagram over the last couple of months. And I have to give these guests props. These aren't easy questions. They really get people to think about their deepest and darkest insecurities, really. But in my opinion, reflection is one of the most important skills that we can have, and it's so important to be able to use it every day and whenever we need to, really. Now, where am I going with all of this? Well, as I'm sure you are all aware, because I've been mentioning it throughout the entire last season, I was training for 7 consecutive marathons. Yes, I ran 7 marathons across 7 days. That's 42.195 kilometers every day for 7 days. I ran rain or shine, and I'm amazed that I was able to finish it, nearly 300 kilometers across 7 days. When you're running every day for over 4 hours, you don't really have anything else to do but reflect about your life choices, about random things. And I'm going to be going through all of this in another episode, just kind of the reflections that I've had about the journey that it took through the 7 marathons, what it was like leading up to the marathons, and just kind of the ideas that I have after. Now, the quote that I read first started stating that as a runner, you have to face the truth about yourself on a regular basis. I think you can cross out runner and add just about anything to that sentence. Facing the truth about yourself, about your training, about anything really is so fundamentally important. I had to face the truth each and every day, every minute during the 7 marathons. During my training now for the upcoming Sydney marathons in September, I need to face the truth. I need to leave my ego at the door. Running 7 marathons is not going to prepare me for running as fast as I can for the Sydney marathon, because that wasn't the goal for the 7. But when we speak about being vulnerable and having guests be vulnerable on the podcast, I think it's important for myself to be vulnerable as well and to speak to things like this that's constantly on my mind. But once again, I'm going to be reflecting in an entirely new episode on just kind of the journey going and leading up to the 7 marathons, during the 7 marathons, and after the 7 marathons. As I'm sure you are all aware, because I did mention it through the last episodes as well, I just started training for the 7 in February. October of last year, I had the unexpected health scare. I was in hospital. I had a major surgery and essentially could not run, could not go to the gym until December. I then started training, but couldn't run until February. And just not being able to do things that I do on a daily basis mentally was the worst I was in the worst state that I ever have been. So you can expect all of that in the upcoming episode where, again, I just kind of reflect on all of that. Now, on today's episode, I chat with Matt Hampton, who chats with us about the bodybuilding community, about peds, and about how injury changed his scope and his sight on training in general. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. All right. Welcome, Matt, to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no worries. Now, Matt, let's maybe start by getting you to introduce yourself if you can.
Okay, well, my name is Matt Hampton. I'm a online coach at the moment. I've done a lot of bodybuilding, strength training, sports in the past. Definitely experienced in all those areas. Yeah. And mainly at the moment, I'm training some competitive athletes in the bodybuilding scene, but a lot of this general population.
Yeah. So when did this all start? When did you train? When did your training start? And what sports did you start with and whatnot?
So I started training at quite a young age. I was in my early teens. Yeah. I got a membership at the Somerton Surf Life Saving Club. Okay. Hated surf life saving. Yeah. Loved lifting weights. Yeah. So I signed up to be a surf life saver, and I reckon I went to like maybe one surf life saving lesson. But then I managed to keep joining the gym there every week, and I trained there when I was like 14, 15, 16, all through school for the most part. A bit of my home as well. Yeah. But in school, mainly volleyball took over. Mm-hmm. Going to Brighton High School, it was a volleyball school. Yeah. So volleyball interest was, if you're on the volleyball team, you're the man. So you need to be good at volleyball. Yeah, yeah. So I played volleyball up until I was about 20, 21 after school. Yeah. Got okay at it. Got in the South Australian Sports Institute. Played around Australia a little bit, but just couldn't quite break into the national team. Yeah. Okay. I moved to beach volleyball, which I found more enjoyable and a bit easier on the body. Yeah. Easier in the knees, but after failing a few times to reach that next level, having consistent knee pain, it sort of led to me being in the gym more than being on the volleyball court. And being in the gym more, I just realized I'm actually getting quite strong, getting quite a lot of muscle here. This is actually like more fun than playing volleyball. And then it sort of just escalated from there. Like I want to become a bodybuilder. I want to become bigger. I want to become stronger. I want to compete in more strength events rather than this volleyball thing. Yeah. So it was kind of a natural transition for you then. Yeah. I mean, I think always that weightlifting was always there since I started there before. And I always wanted to be, I guess it started with a bit of, I was very inconfident as a child. So I wanted to have a little muscle, I wanted to build confidence. I wanted to be able to speak to girls, do the things you want to do when you're a kid. Yeah. And building the muscle was sort of a stepping stone to sort of help me get the confidence up. Yeah. Although it didn't help that much at the time. Yeah. I feel as though it did pay off in the long run. In the long run, yeah. With time, everything pays off, I guess. Yeah. Cool. So from there, when did you start getting serious into bodybuilding? Was it from a young age, or did it kind of become later? So it became more serious once I fully quit volleyball. Yeah. Studied to become a personal trainer. Yeah. And then I realized, okay, it's bodybuilding now. I'm going to try to get as big as possible. And after training for that many years, I was in my sort of early 20s by then. I think that's when I took the step to take PEDs and bring my physique to that next level, to try to become a physique which unattainable to most. I wanted to become like Arnie or The Rock, or like they had these idols who were this really big muscular man. I'm like, I want to be like that. Yeah. How do I get to that level? And then I realized that these guys didn't get there from training hard and eating well. There's more to it than that. Yeah. So I took that step, and then it escalated from there. Yeah. Okay. So early 20s, yeah. And what I guess drew you to the bodybuilding world? Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think it's just an internal passion, desire to be noticed, to be strong, to be powerful, and almost like that nature inside you. How you want to be a protector, you want to be able to provide, you want to be able to, you want to be masculine. I sort of had that sort of desire in me. That I just wanted to become different than everyone else. I didn't want to be the same. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay. And when did that confidence come into play? Because I think that's an interesting thing. A lot of people when they're 14, 15 lack that confidence and whatnot. And that's probably a main thing why people get into the gym at that age. So when did that kind of start building, and when did you notice a change there? Absolutely. It absolutely is the main thing of why many kids start lifting. And to be completely honest, although it may have paid off a little bit when I was a child, I didn't really get that confidence until probably outside factors that weren't actually the gym. I think just living life and becoming more experienced in other areas, getting more exposure in different jobs, and actually getting yourself out there, or being forced to put yourself out there, the confidence grew in other manners and other ways. But the weightlifting definitely did help, especially as it became separated from the pack. When I was the big guy, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I actually am. I've made something for myself. I've got further than somebody else. I've started to recognise and I've made an accomplishment here, and then I'm actually somewhat proud of it. Yeah. And when you become proud of yourself, to a small degree, you become more confident by nature. Yeah, for sure. So that confidence sort of came into play along with the experience of being in life. So in the sort of early 20s, the confidence sort of finally arrived after many, many years.
Yeah, it is I guess an experience thing, going to the gym gives you that experience, but then you get experience from the outside world. So that's a very good point, I think. In the last 5 years, I guess, what has changed with your training, with your, the way that you do things? Because I think things evolve all the time. You evolve as a person. So what has changed, I guess, if you run down the last 5 years?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. And we do evolve as people, and our goals do change. Yeah. I've been through periods of building muscle, building strength, different competitions. And each year can be very different depending on the lifestyle, the values of that life at the time. I guess your relationships, your work, where you're living and stuff like that. So the past 5 years, I suffered quite a major injury about 3 years ago where I ruptured my pec. So I tore my pec in half through the muscle belly doing a bench press when I was training for training to beat the national bench press record, which I was very, very close to. And unfortunately, the basic training session, it just tore in half. And that completely changed my path for the next few years, especially that next year was all changing my mindset around training, embracing it and not being able to train, embracing sort of core values like patience, and I guess changing my perspective on training as a whole. I was very much, this is how you have to train, this is how you build muscle. And then after the injury, I was like, oh, you actually can train different ways. We can do different things. There's not one set way to do things. We can open our mind to different training methods, different training styles. It doesn't have to look pretty. It doesn't have to look amazing. You can run, you can jump, you can do all sorts of lifting and still, reach these different goals and stuff. It's not just you have to squat and bench press and do this and this particular way. And I think after that injury, my goals changed a lot. And from there, I guess the next year was rehab. Started swimming. Once I rehabbed my chest, I'm like, okay, I want to become bigger than what I was when I did my chest. So that next year I built muscle, surpassed that size I attained, because the realistic factor was I couldn't go back and beat that bench press record, which I would love to do, but due to the nature of the injury, it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So the past 5 years has changed a lot, and mainly based around that injury, which actually changed my perspective quite a lot on life.
Cool. Well, let's get into that injury. I mean, being a physio, I'm happy that you brought that up because that's quite interesting to me. When it first happened, think back, how did that, I guess, feel for you? And because it is quite devastating. You're working towards something, and, a lot of athletes go through the exact same thing. Those first few months, run down, like, what your mindset was like then.
Yeah, well, when I first did it, I was on the bench press, and it felt like slow motion at the time. It wasn't a max. It wasn't anything crazy. It was just a routine day, and I was going down, and so I was looking at my chest, which I don't often do. I was looking at my chest, and I could just see it unzipping from the top, just slowly opening up and separating in half. And obviously, I screamed, dropped the weight. My poor partner at the time had to try to get it off me, and she couldn't, obviously, because there was over 200 kilos in the bar. And then I just sat there for like 20 minutes in shock, just thinking about my life. I'm like, this is all I was doing. I wanted to beat this record. This was my goal. I just sat there thinking, like, how bad is this? Can this be fixed? Can I still get towards this goal? What am I going to do? And then the next day, scans, hospitals, and speaking to the top surgeon in Adelaide, he's like, sorry, we can't actually fix your pec. Unfortunately, it didn't just snap off the bone. The tendon didn't rupture. You tore the muscle belly in half. And it's like, we can't fix that. And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, you can't stitch two pieces of meat together. It'll just pull apart, and you have to. Unfortunately, you're going to lose your pec forever. I'm like freaking out. Like, I'm sad. I'm having a few real rough days. I'm calling every doctor I know around Australia, to be honest, to try how can we fix this? And about after a week of this stress, and luckily my family was super supportive, we actually did find a doctor who was willing to open me up and see if there's any frays of the pec tendon still on the inside of the pec, on the muscular side, to try to pull it back across and at least somewhat connect it, mainly for aesthetics.
Yeah.
And he managed to find two little frays of the tendon which he could pull across and pull my pec back together to improve it, or at least stop me from losing the pec. And which I'm so grateful for, because that was just such a hard time. And then those next few months and weeks, just not being able to move that chest, having prolonged time in a sling because of the surgery being a bit different than usual. It was, yes, over 6 weeks in the sling with no movement, sleeping upright. And me just itching to do something, or itching to know how this is going to prepare and how it's going to feel and how it's going to determine my life moving forward. And I guess as soon as I got out of the sling, I started moving again. I just really embraced that process and actually quite enjoyed it, to be honest. As weird as that sounds, I really enjoyed the comeback. I found great pleasure in being like, I can do this, I can get over this, I can bring my body back now. Like, I just need that little bit of little bit of boost that got me, and then I was happy. And I was like, every week I was like, I can move a little more, a little more range in my arm this week. You know, I can hold a weight this week. You know. Eventually, when range of motion returned after a few months, and started lifting weights and started swimming, I realized, okay, you know, the bench press record may be off the table, but that's not the end of the world. Like, I can do other things, right? Like, let's just build back up muscle, because I lost about 20 kilos of muscle just by not training. I wasn't eating as much either, because I didn't have the desire to eat and maintain size, and I wasn't taking performance-enhancing drugs, because why take drugs when you're in that state? And then once I rehabbed it and got back, it was my mindset was pretty good, and the whole experience has really developed me as a human, and it took me where I am today, and it's just changed my whole perspective on rehab and training and physio and all those things. I've just had a much greater understanding of now.
Yeah, and I always find that interesting, because there's been a few others, Lockie Jones, Stephanie Rice, you know, other elite athletes who have been on the podcast, and they've spoken to similar things where you're kind of at the top, you're working towards something, and then something immediately happens, and you know, this is all you've known, and it just comes to a sudden stop. So I know you already mentioned a few things that you did in that time for your rehab and whatnot, but what, I guess, did you adopt, or what specific things did you adopt that you still do now, because of that time that you couldn't train as intently as you were once?
Yeah, I guess my entire view on training changed. My entire view on training definitely did change. When I first started rehab, I believed that there were specific rehab protocols you had to go through. And as I got further into rehab, I realized that you're just about restoring movement. You can do it any way you want. Like, there's no set rules. You don't have to train a certain way. You don't have to move a certain way. The body's so capable of adapting and moving all sorts of ways. And I think it just opened my mind to taking away the scarcity of movement and lifting, and open this whole new world of I can do things in many ways, and I shouldn't be scared, and no one should be scared of moving or training. And the body can adapt, and we can do things, you know, which we may not have thought would be possible.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's continuing now. I'm still swimming now. I'm still doing a lot of these things, which I did over rehab. I picked up other little things. I started getting really interested in like forearm training and things like that, which I just never trained before, because this didn't really have time for it. Now I'm like, I want to get jacked forearms. Like, and it's just something I learned to do when I was doing rehab. I was like, I love my forearms now. They're really strong, and the grip strength is really strong. And I think the biggest thing, like I said, like I was saying, is just that whole mindset shift on the approach, rather than the particular practices in themselves.
Okay, cool. And what I guess things now are you working towards, you know, this past year, whatnot, now that everything's kind of changed in that regard?
Yep. So this past year there's been a few goals on the horizon which have come and gone. I've had a few opportunities where I've had to put on a lot of size really quickly, and a few opportunities where I've had to lose some size. When I did rupture my pec tendon, actually, it was my first time going under a general, put to sleep for the surgery. When they actually put me under that general, when I woke up, I actually had an AFib. So I actually did stay in hospital for another night, get another surgery the next day, or another procedure, go under another general, and then for me to restart or re-shock my heart back into its rhythm. So over the past few years since then, it's been making sure my heart has been okay as well. Being a large individual, I have quite a degree of hypertrophy of my heart, which is going to occur with someone training like I'm training, doing what I'm doing. So that's been monitored a lot more closely each year now. So each year it's do my heart checks, do my echocardiograms, make sure the size is okay and the function's okay. So that's sort of the first thing on each year, sort of like value system. Make sure I'm going to live this year, and make sure I'm not going to do any more damage this year. That being said, I got presented with some opportunities on TV, which I had to build up for. So I built up a lot of muscle again. I took PEDs again. I became quite large. I got to my biggest size ever, which was 144 kilograms in the morning, which felt cool. Like I felt big, which is awesome. Unfortunately, that fell through. And then I went through a dieting phase. We traveled through Europe for a mate's wedding. My wife and I, we had a great time, so I was just a dieting phase there. And now we're off to Japan next week, so I'm in a little bit of maybe a small dieting phase now, just to have a good physique for Japan. I've got a client competing over there. Really pumped for her. Hopefully she can win her pro card. And yeah, the goal is sort of this, it's nothing like long term at this time. It's more just been around my happiness. And then short-term goals over the year, where it's building muscle, coming down a little bit. Because at the end of the day, like, I've got to a point where any more muscle long-term is just too much. As weird as that sounds, like being a large individual has a lot of consequences, negative ones. Like I mentioned the heart before. If you maintain 150 kilos of body weight, it's strain, it's stress on the heart. You can't live like that for a long period of time. At some point, you have to downsize. So it's about finding that balance with me, where I can live happy, live healthy, feel good, live for a long enough time, but still enjoy my values and enjoy my life whilst I'm living. Because it's not all about like how long you live, it's about the quality of that life during while you're living as well.
And that's a good, interesting thought, because I think, I mean, it's probably, I assume, and it sounds like, you know, you've had these values, or you've adopted these values through your experience and whatnot, and these thought processes. But I think it's probably a lot different, or it might have been a lot different when, you know, you're in your early 20s and whatnot. You don't really think about these long-term kind of things and these long-term values. So I appreciate you mentioning, you know, those perspectives. But I do want to eventually get into, you know, the different classes of bodybuilding competition and whatnot. But let's maybe go back to your 20s when you were saying that you started the PEDS. How did that process start? You know, where did you go for information, or how did that kind of all come about, basically?
Yeah, it was actually much more difficult back then. A lot less information, a lot less people would be open to share information. So back then it was pretty much try to find somewhere to buy them, and I think got it from somewhere from China. They sent it over, and it came in a toy truck, like hidden in a toy truck. Then like I had no idea what this stuff was. It was like I was dumb. It wasn't the best. I wouldn't go back and do that again. That's something that I would definitely regret. Although the decision to take the PEDs at the time is not something I would regret. I definitely wanted to do that still. But back then, the way to go about it was challenging. And at that time, I didn't want to go open and myself tell people I'm taking the drugs either. So it's like, I wanted to take these drugs because my goals required these drugs to hit. But I couldn't tell anybody that I wanted to take these drugs, and I didn't know how to get the drugs without telling anybody. So it was a very strange process back then, a very, very strange process. And I think as I finally found, like the first couple of years of taking them, it was on and off. It was, how can I get them? I didn't really know what to take to a certain extent. I sort of had a rough idea of how much testosterone that I produce and how much testosterone gets me above that, and sort of, you know, put me in that super physiological range to build muscle, recover better, things like that. But it was very much uninformed. But as the years went by, the resources became available. I became this more knowledgeable in general, and learned how to actually research these things and learn how to become smarter in these areas, because understanding a topic is a lot more than just Googling it. You need to know how to Google it and how to understand it. It's like it's like reading research papers or studies. It's like you can't just tell someone, oh, go read the research. It's like, if they've got no experience in that field or reading research, that study means nothing to them. They can't interpret that properly or apply it correctly in their life. So over many years, I got better and better at doing that, and finally found out ways to use them in a manner which aligns with my values safely, and productively.
Yeah. Okay. And what kind of things do you have to do, I guess, or that you're doing now that you didn't back then? You know, are there any tests that you do or anything that you track, you know, for safety or for health and whatnot?
I think the biggest thing with men and PDs, like probably the biggest killer would be, or the thing we're concerned about is our heart a lot of times. And the basic thing to check is your blood pressure. So every enhanced athlete out there, especially the larger ones, just check your blood pressure. Because a lot of them have chronically elevated blood pressure. And chronically elevated blood pressure is something you don't want. That's going to lead to health consequences down the road sooner rather than later. So, I mean, that's something I actually didn't know when I first started taking them. Although I was much smaller and likely probably wasn't facing those issues anyway. But the blood pressure is the one thing which you monitor first and foremost. You buy a blood pressure monitor. You do that yourself. From there, it's blood tests. And with them, depending on what you're taking and how much and how long, I mean, yearly is probably fine. But for someone who's highly muscular or competitive or doing a bodybuilding show, it may be twice a year, maybe 3 times per year, depending on how much you're pushing those limits. The more drugs, often to an extent, the more results. But with that comes a greater cost. You put more stress on your body, it's going to bite back or come back at you as well.
Okay. And what differentiates, I guess, when you're competing versus when you're not competing? Like, is it just more that you have to take, or?
Yeah, interesting. Yes and no, right? So it does depend on the individual, their response to the drugs, and the capacity and what they're competing. Open bodybuilder is generally going to take a lot more drugs than a men's physique competitor, which is the one that wear the board shorts, which will be a lot more than a female category, so to say. So the range varies a lot, but you got off-season and prep, or on-season and off-season, pretty much. Off-season is the time when you're growing. You're putting your body through a lot of strain by eating a lot of food, doing a lot of training, and taking a lot of drugs to build that muscle tissue. But even in prep, you're putting your body through a lot of strain by having a hypocaloric diet. So it's very, to retain that tissue, you need a lot of drugs. So both situations require elevated levels of drugs for different reasons. One's to help support greater muscle mass, and one's to ensure that stays when you're in like that deprived dieting state. So both can be quite stressful in their own rights and quite demanding on health. Depending on the size of the individual, if it's a smaller competitor, off-season is normally the healthier option. If you're a larger competitor, normally the prep mode is probably a healthier option, but it does depend on the individual and what they're taking. Yeah,
and I guess that goes hand in hand with what you just mentioned. If you are competing, then it is probably better to potentially take more blood tests and whatnot. If you're taking more, that makes sense now. What were some side effects that you experienced yourself?
Yeah, okay. Not many. I mean, it depends. When people think of side effects of PDs, they often think of the wrong side effects. People say, "Oh, he's got acne, he's got hair loss or hair growth, or gynecomastia," or this very like visual side effects. People
and that
sort
doesn't
of
always
aggression,
need to be a side effect, you know?
They're not that bad. If someone gets acne, it's not a big deal. If someone has a heart attack or starts having brain function issues or kidney or liver issues, they're the serious side effects. They're the side effects people don't talk about as much. People are like, but what if I get acne, or what if I lose my hair? It's like, bro, we can easily manage that. We can just take a little bit less. We can manage your dose. We can manage those very easily. And they're not of high concern when it comes to your health. They're of high concern to your I guess your personal values, maybe to a degree. But in terms of general health, they're not a big concern, generally easy managed. But the side effects people should be worried about is monitoring their blood pressure, ensuring they're staying healthy enough, ensuring they can do this for long enough to actually achieve their goals. Because to take steroids, it's not that you take them for 8 weeks or 12 weeks and you get jacked. You take them for 3 years or 4 years or 5 years and then you get more jacked. It's a long-term process. People seem to misinterpret how they work, and it takes a long time to build this muscle tissue, even with the steroids. It takes a very long time.
Okay. And that's a good point. It's all about perspective, because there's different, I guess everybody has a side effect that they interpret more or less, so it doesn't need to have, having acne or losing hair or whatnot doesn't need to have a negative connotation if that, from your perspective, isn't negative. So that's a very good way to look at it. Why do you think things have changed in the sense of, people being more outspoken about drugs and being more open? Because I know you mentioned a bit earlier that, it was very hush hush back then and hard to get information and whatnot, whereas now it seems like there's loads of information out there. What do you think has changed, or have you noticed much of a change, I guess?
Definitely been a huge change.
Yeah.
Definitely a lot more people are being a lot more open. There are, I guess, with the rise of the internet, social media, the platforms are available for that information to be shared, for people to come out and say these things. The same goes with any field.
Yeah.
People become more open with everything.
Yeah.
So it's not just the drugs themselves.
Yeah.
It's anything in life. There's more information out
Yeah.
there now. I don't think anything has really changed to a major degree other than the accessibility of information. I think that's the biggest thing which has come out. And I think people also become finally aware that because the accessibility of information has become higher and people are sharing more, people become less scared and less worried. And I guess the awareness is higher. So people, oh yeah, he's doing that. Okay, I'm not ashamed anymore because I was doing that, but I was ashamed now. But now I've seen I was being open about it. I can be open about it too. Then we can discuss things together and we can maybe find out approaches to go by in a better way together.
Yeah, I guess, just like you mentioned, with anything, there's more information out there, then, people become less scared. People just have that knowledge and whatnot. What do you think, I guess, has changed? You've been in the bodybuilding space for a while now, so what do you think has changed over the years in, I guess, the bodybuilding community and space?
I think the biggest change has come through the introduction of new categories in bodybuilding. Because bodybuilding traditionally, even when I started bodybuilding, it was just bodybuilding. Like, it was become the biggest, most muscular, leanest physique on stage. And then we found the introduction of men's physique, which was quite a fair few years ago now, which was the board short category. And then more recently, we had the introduction of the classic physique, which is Chris Bumstead's category at the moment, which is that sort of, I guess it's meant to represent the golden era of bodybuilding, meant to represent like the 70s. It's like that muscular physique, small waist, but not hyper muscular where you're a freak. But in all honesty, all these categories now in today, they're all freaky and ridiculously muscular. Even though they may be smaller, like the classic physique smaller than open bodybuilding, they're still extreme. They are still very extreme, and they're still all growing to an extent here. So the biggest thing that's changed probably has been the introduction of those categories, because it gives people the idea those physiques are more achievable. And they are to a degree, but they're still highly dependent on genetics. Like any sport at a high level, you need the genetics to do well with that sport, regardless of what that sport is, regardless of how much effort you put in, regardless of what drugs you take. So people at least have this seems more achievable to be less muscular, even though it's still likely, it's highly unlikely that they will be able to reach those levels.
Yeah. Okay. Are those the main categories, or what are the other categories out there?
Yeah. So for men, you've really got the three main categories. You got open bodybuilding, classic physique, and the men's physique. There also is a 212 division, which is 212 pounds or less, which is bodybuilding, but under the 212 pounds, which is like 90 something kilos, which is typically made for the shorter guys. Although that division seems to be somewhat fading out, as those 212 competitors are often shifting up to the open bodybuilding class. And then the women have a broader degree of categories now as well. Bikini being the most popular, wellness being the new addition, which is really popular, which is more muscular legs than bikini, but still a smaller body. And you got figure, physique, and bodybuilding again for women too. So women go from very small to very big. For all those people out there who, are wanting to, at whatever age, start to train or start, I guess, in the world or in the bodybuilding space, where do they start? Yeah, right. I mean, I guess they start by going to the gym. I mean, there's so much that encompasses bodybuilding that you won't be able to know it all in 1 month or 1 year or even a couple of years, because you have to have a full understanding of nutrition, of training, having a lifestyle which supports them all together, supplementation. And if you are competing, I've been referring to the IFBB most of the time. So IFBB is the bodybuilding federation which does the Mr. Olympia, Arnold Classic, the biggest bodybuilding federation there is. That's what has the open bodybuilding, classic physique, men's physique. There are the smaller federations out there, but for this sake of this conversation, the IFBB is the main federation of the world, and that division is also it's untested. So if you are starting out and you had goals of being in the IFBB, you have to be in the back of your mind somewhere that at some point you probably do have to take performance enhancing drugs to get to the level where you are competitive on a national or even global scale.
Okay. And when you mentioned before you have an athlete in Japan trying to get her pro card, what's that?
So she's in wellness. She's actually here in Adelaide, so we fly out to Japan the end of next week. She flies out. I fly out the start of the week afterwards. And yeah, she's competing in the wellness category. So she's actually older. She's in her 40s, and she'll be competing in the masters category. She's been training for about 5 years now, doing a fantastic job. And we hope to get a pro card because she has the genetics. She's Brazilian, so she's got bigger legs genetically. And the wellness category, like I mentioned before, it's like bikini, but with a more built and muscular legs. So it's almost an unbalanced physique. You almost want bigger legs and smaller upper body, which has become quite the trend for a lot of women these days wanting to build their bodies. They sort of want to get these big glutes, build some big glutes and look like these wellness women. So that's sort of what we're going for in Japan to get that title, hopefully.
Yeah, and then the pro card is professional.
Yeah, so the way things work is if you win a pro qualifying IFBB show, you get a pro card, which essentially means you can compete in pro shows. And by competing in pro shows, obviously there becomes prize money. You get paid for it. And it's a way to get to the Olympia. And the Olympia is the king, it's the crown, it's where everyone wants to compete. The goal of many people is just to get to the Olympia, let alone be the Mr. Olympia. Just to get there is the goal for people. And to get there, first you need to be a pro, which can be quite challenging to be. And then you need to win an Olympia qualifying pro event or win enough pro shows to get points to qualify you for the Olympia. So that's sort of the progression in terms of how to become an elite bodybuilder. All
right. So then going back to these new people that, are first getting in the world, they want to do their first competition. How do they go about that?
Yeah. I mean, so let's say they're competing in the IFBB, and let's say they're in a category which doesn't require as much muscle mass. Okay. So you're looking at, and they haven't lifted before. You're probably looking at a few years, 2-3 years of this lifting first, building some muscle. And then you want to start getting some competitive experience. And you can compete in the IFBB or you can compete in local competition. Just for the exposure and experience. There are small local competitions out there. There's tester competitions, so there's natural competitions out there, which can be good for people who are not willing to take the drugs yet. So let's say it's 3 years of building muscle. You do a year of sort of, prep, so to say. Or that prep itself may only take somewhere between 8 weeks of dieting to 25 weeks of dieting, depending on the individual, how much body fat they hold, how lean they want to get. And once they start competing for a while, they learn the skill of competing, which is actually another skill in itself. How to pose, how to present yourself, how to win shows is not only based on the physique, but it's how you show it off. You got to create that illusion. You got to be able to make yourself look like the winner. You need to look the best on stage. Doesn't matter how big you are. It's not about how much muscle you have. It's about how you look, which is the very interesting thing, because people can come out and they can be the most muscular bodybuilder ever, but they won't win a show because they can lose to somebody who's 20 kilos less muscle than them just by the looks, which is, again, a lot of genetics. You can't control your muscle shapes to a large degree. But yeah, if you can present well, which takes time and practice, start competing. If you are competing in the IFBB, you probably have to go in that pathway of PEDs at some point, unless you're a bikini athlete, which shouldn't need to. So you may be looking at 5 years, to be honest. I mean, you can compete sooner and you can do well sooner. The freaks out there can do really well really soon. But you're probably looking at about 5 years of training and understanding that all, and getting the lifestyle in play and building a physique which is competitive, and then introducing PEDs and then competing, probably about 5 years or so.
Okay, long process then.
Roughly.
Yeah.
It could be longer, it could be shorter.
Yeah, okay. So then as a coach, we've touched this in the past in a few episodes, but not into much detail. But you have somebody that gets to this stage, they finish competing. What does after look like? Because I think mentally, you're in some of your best shape ever. You look amazing, and then it potentially isn't foreseeable to be like that forever, really. So what's the aftermath like? A lot of the times,
it's really tough in bodybuilding because it's visual. So you know, or you should know that your physique is going to look worse over time. And of course, the post-comp blues come in, which is the same with any competitive sporting athlete. You can't peak a skill and keep that peak forever. Weightlifting, running, you peak the skill, you perform the event, and then it has to come down. You have to bridge it. You have to have processes in play to sort of come out of it and then prepare for your next event. The trouble with bodybuilding is you see that happening visually every day. You're like, oh, I look shocking now. I look like crap. And a lot of the time it's all subjective. It's all in your head, because a lot of the time they still look way better than anybody else out there. They still look amazing, but they really struggle mentally. And the big thing with post-comp with bodybuilding is the dieting. So you've spent possibly even 20 weeks of being in a restrictive diet. All of a sudden it's like, oh, I can eat again. And your hunger signals can be off the chart. Like they can be so high that you will keep eating until you can't eat anymore. And then you'll keep eating after that. You make yourself sick. These bodybuilders out there will make themselves sick. Day in, day out after the show, just because they've been restricted for so long. Their leptin levels and ghrelin levels are off the charts. They're a low body fat percentages. They need to restore body fat. They need to restore these hormones to a balance. And it's just challenging because it can be quite dangerous at this point, because you can be putting on 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 kilos of weight in a matter of days, which is scary. It's scary to do and really challenging on the body. So it's best to have a coach, people to keep you accountable, and a plan coming out of the competition to allow you to increase food at a rate which is responsible, because you have to increase body fat. You're not going to stay lean. So ideally you have quite a large increase initially, and you sort of maintain that sort of a small surplus for the next few weeks until you start to feel normal again, which doesn't often happen, but it really depends on the individual and how their prep went and their mindset. But ideally you have someone keeping you accountable. There are drugs out there which can help in this sense, that can hinder or hold off your appetite a little bit, but even then it still can be very, very challenging.
Yeah. Okay. As a coach, what's your perspective like now as a coach versus when you were training but not coaching? Is there anything different with your mindset as an athlete yourself now?
Yeah, I guess I can often remind myself that as an athlete, from a coach's point of view, there are people out there who coach themselves, and it can be done. It's just, as the athlete, your opinion or your subjective view of yourself when you're looking in the mirror can be skewed by your emotions. So you're looking at yourself and you think, oh, I look a bit fat today, I look a bit off today, and you'll make a change based on how you look that morning. I'm going to eat less today, or I'm going to eat more today, or I'm going to do more cardio today, or I'm going to do an extra few sets of bench press today because I don't feel pumped, or whatever the case may be. But having coached for a while now, it really has put me, from an athlete point of view, is in just to relax. Don't do anything irrational. Don't base anything you do off emotion. So if you wake up feeling shit or feeling off or feeling fat, whatever the case may be, just don't change anything based on that emotion. Let the day go by, stick to the plan, and then go from there. Because often the mistakes people make is they act too quickly. When it comes to bodybuilding, most of the year, we're not making changes based on any single acute data point. We're looking at averages. So what was your weekly weight average? What was your weekly intake average? What was your weekly step average? How's that influencing the way your body look? Okay, how can we change this the next week? Rather than being like, okay, you jumped a kilo today, let's make a change. Because it's just not enough data. In one day, the changes can be so great, from fluid dynamics to water retention, different things outside of our control, which can obviously lead to irrational decision making. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And I guess tying that back into being a coach or having a coach, that's quite good to, put yourself in a position where you have that support, because if you're feeling that way, then having a quick check-in with your coach can be quite beneficial, I think. Myself included, I have a coach, being a marathon runner, and if I've had a shit run, it's, my coach checks in right away and whatnot and kind of puts things at ease. So, I think having that coaching and that support system is quite important. What Matt, are some, I guess, myths that you have heard or that you have potentially heard over the years being in the bodybuilding world? What are some myths about the world, about the community, that are just not true, really?
Myths about the bodybuilding world. Oh, I think a lot of them do lie around the whole drug use thing. A lot of the outside world seem to think they are completely magic and this completely change everything. So they overstate the effects to many degrees. They also overstate the side effects to many degrees too. So I think like they'll think, oh, you turn into a rage animal or anything like this. I think that's just a big myth out there that, you know, if you take some steroids or you take them, you know, to a certain degree, you're not going to turn into a psychopath. Unless you already had those tendencies prior, it could make it a little bit worse. They're not going to completely transform your a mental state to any large degree. Nor are they going to transform your body to any huge degree either that quickly either. So I think it's a big myth there. I think most, I don't know, I think the myths are normally misconceptions about how it's all done.
Yeah, cool.
Time frames, expectation.
Yeah, because it sounds like it's a big, long process. So, you know, that's probably a main one that you need a year or two, and that's about it. Now, one thing that we do on the show is the vulnerability corner. I've already sent you a bunch of the questions, though, but what I'm going to get you to do, Matt, is pick a number from 1 through 5. All of these questions for any new listeners are about vulnerability. So I'll read out the question. I'll have you answer, you know, to the best of your ability, and we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, I didn't quite get through these questions.
Yeah, so, that's all right. That's all right.
So just give me the 2, or whatever it is, and then we'll go from there.
So for the vulnerability question, what is the personal quality of which you're most ashamed of?
A personal quality I'm ashamed of.
Yes. Take your time.
Okay, there's one personal quality about myself which I get quite annoyed at quite often, and it's my memory.
Okay. Yeah.
Especially long-term memory.
Yeah.
I really, really struggle to recall things of my childhood, my teenage years, even just during school and just after school. I have a really, really hard time to remember much at all, which I find quite frustrating. And just it sort of gets to me very often, which is odd. I don't know why it annoys me so much, because at the end of the day, I am who I am now. These memories, I mean, they don't really mean much from. I've learned from them, so to say. Like I feel as though I can, every time I'm faced with a situation, whether it's normally negative situations, I'm quite good at being open to be like, okay, how can this situation become better in the future? How can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? So I'm sure I've grown from a lot of these memories, but somewhere it's just blanked out. It's like I pushed away a lot of this stuff. Not that I had a bad childhood, not that there was anything like in that trauma, but it's just gone. It seems to be gone, and I'm not sure why that is. I have a feeling that, I mean, I've come up with several little like ideas of why. Initially, I thought, like, because when I first started doing this bodybuilding thing, I thought, oh, it must be the drugs. And I realized, you know, as I started getting more knowledgeable in the drugs and taking more responsible doses and figuring out things, I'm like, no, the drugs aren't affecting my memory. Then I thought it might have been my sleep apnea. When I got quite large, I realized I had sleep apnea. And I got a sleep apnea machine. That helped my sleep a lot. Memory is still the same. still no good. So yeah, it's just one of those things where it's just, it bothers me a lot at times, and especially if my wife will say something and I'll try to remember back. I'm like, why can't I remember this thing? Like, but other than that, I don't really like to dislike myself at all. I guess no one does, right? But that's probably the thing that annoys me the most, I think, which is quite strange, I think.
Do you go through reflection a lot?
Probably not enough.
No? Okay.
That could be something I could maybe practice more often. Just even this reflection of the days and weeks that go by, because I'm someone that I'm a very happy person. I'm a very grateful person. Each day I'm happy and excited, but I don't often reflect on those days, I think, because I'm enjoying them. And I look to the next day, and the next day I enjoy that, and I enjoy that. That I don't often look back. So that could be a personality thing that I've never looked back, which maybe lead to me just not remembering things and never actually recalling them. Maybe you've taught me right now, here and now.
Maybe.
I can't remember as much stuff. Obviously, I can remember knowledgeable things. I can learn. And I make a conscious effort to learn things. But it's the experiences where even like we traveled to, I said, with my wife this year to Europe. great time, loved it all. We've been looking back on it, which is fantastic. Haven't forgotten that yet. That was only just very recently. But I traveled to Europe 10 years ago, and I can't remember anything. Like, I went to some of the same places. I'm like, oh, this is amazing. This is new. I haven't been here before. I'm like, wait, I've been here before.
Yeah,
like,
just can't remember it.
Yeah.
Okay. And you know, you're a happy person. It's that personality and whatnot. But do you have those bad days, or how do you get past those bad days then?
It's very, very rare. Very rare for me to have a bad day.
How you outlook things can change the perspective of the day, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's because I'm extremely positive, and everyone that knows me will say this. They're like, you don't get upset, you don't get angry, you don't get mad. I'm like, I don't really get upset or mad or angry. Like, I always seem to find a light. Like, even if something bad happens, I guess I get frustrated or annoyed at the time. I don't often show that. I'm not sure if that's a negative or positive thing, but I don't often, especially around my wife, I don't want to show her that I'm upset, or even that I'm vulnerable at times, which I probably could actually do at times to a small extent. But a lot of times I'll just keep it. I'll keep it to myself, work on what I can do to make the situation better, supporting her, bringing a smile, and it just works. Like, I think that's something that's people with this get too caught up on. They stress about too many things, strip out things outside of their control. Like, if it's not in your control, we can't do anything about it. It just logically, it just makes no sense to stress about it. So especially being happy, and again with the pec tear, which further enhanced my ability to be patient. I think really align the two, because happiness and patience sort of come together a lot. Because people that aren't patient, they often aren't happy, because they want gratification now, they want this now, they want to eat now, they want to be here now, whatever they want to do. But take a deep breath, wait a few minutes, wait an hour, whatever the case may be, do something else, and you find out, you just saved a lot of stress just from being patient, and that patience has led straight to happiness.
And you've then changed the entire rest of the day, the rest of the week, because stress has such negative impact. So absolutely, it does. I mean, even from a physiological point of view, from when it comes to bodybuilding and training and stuff like that, I've seen physiques look like rubbish. Like, I'm like, why are you gaining? Why are you holding weight? Why you look like bad? And it's just, I'm not sleeping, I'm stressed. I'm like, and then you give them a bit more food maybe, or you give them, a rest day, or you tell them to go to the movies, or you tell them to go for a walk, and then they feel amazing. And then the next day they look even better. It's like, you're just stressing out for no reason. Right? We forget all of these negative
I think
things.
I think that's one thing which people often misinterpret is the idea of, I mean, this is what I believe anyway to an extent, is recovery modalities. The best way in which they serve recovery isn't necessarily the physiological impact of that modality itself. So not necessarily if you go into an ice bath or a sauna or a massage or whatever the case may be, like the physical changes that modality is doing probably isn't doing much. But if it's making you relaxed and stressed and having a good time and you enjoy that modality, that's probably giving you a huge benefit. But if you find that stressful, if you're getting a massage and you're just fucking hurting and you're in pain the whole time, it could be a result in a negative to your recovery, to how you feel. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, where can people find you? If they're seeking help or whatnot, where can they find you? Plug all that in.
Go ahead and go on my Instagram at Matt Hampton PT. I'm very I'm on there all the time. So I reply to DMs on there too. Or feel free to email matthamptoncoaching@gmail.com.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks, Matt, so much for coming on the podcast. I think this was very informative. And I hope everybody listening enjoyed, today's episode, and definitely reach out to Matt if you have any questions. Yeah,
thank you, Jordan. I really enjoyed it.
No worries. Cheers. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Now, if you are on Apple Podcasts, please hit that 5-star review. It means a lot. Don't really have much else to say, so I'm just going to end it off here. Thank you all for listening again, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.